Moed Katan Daf Dalid contains three main sugyas. First, the Gemara finishes off its discussion of what is the source of the halacha of Tosfos Shvius. You have to add before Shemitah and after Shemitah times in which we forbid the malacha that's forbidden to do on Shemitah. Gemara is working through three potential sources and contradictions to each other. Then the Gemara will go back to the Mishnah and talk about the Isser to carry water from a pool or a well to a field on Shemitah. The Gemara will list a number of halachos when it's permitted to carry, under what circumstances it is permitted to carry the water, and when is it usher, for what reason. And the Gemara will again go back to the Mishnah and talk about the halacha of Elazar ben Azariah, about widening or fixing a stream of water that's carrying water, when you're allowed to widen it and deepen it and fix it. Okay, so let's begin. First, we're discussing the halacha of Tosfos Shvius. You have to add on from a Shemitah year. You have to have some of the Isser Malacha starts before Shemitah actually starts itself. So the Gemara has said that this was a takana of Beis Hillel Mishamai, and Reb Gamliel came along and canceled it. The Gemara had said that he maybe didn't cancel everything, but he shortened it from beginning on Shavuot, on Pesach and Shavuos, depending what type of field, to just 30 days before Shemitah. So now the Gemara says that you can't tell me that this was a takana because I have a source for it in Psukim and I have a source for it in Halacha Moshe Sinai. So we've already seen the Halacha Moshe Sinai. The Halacha Moshe Sinai says that this Isser of Tosfos Shvius does not apply to a field that has young trees spread at a density of 10 trees per base sa or more. That's halacha Moshe Sinai, which shows that the entire halacha of Tosfos Shvius must already be halacha Moshe Sinai. Now the Gemara wants to show that as a source and in pasuk. Gemara does that by quoting a brisa that has a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. What is the need for the pasuk that says b'choresh v'katzir tishbois? It says choresh v'katzir in Hilchos Shabbos. So the Gemara says it cannot be referring to Hilchos Shabbos because we already know that it's also in Hilchos Shabbos, so it has to be referring to something else. The Gemara says it refers to Shemitah. The Gemara asks, but you don't need to tell me that Choresh and Katzir, the plowing and harvesting, is also in Shemitah. We already know that. The Torah all already said. So Sad Chalos Sizor, Kamar Chalos Sizmar, which is types of planting and types of harvesting. So what do you have to tell me, Choresh and Katzir? So Gemara says those two halachos, according to Rabbi Akiva, are telling me the halacha of Tosfos Shvius. One is telling me that you have to start the Isser of Shvius Malacha before Shemitah, and the other is that you have to continue afterwards. You're not allowed to plow before Shemitah to help the ground during the Shemitah year, and you're not allowed to harvest after Shemitah fruits which grew in the Shemitah year. That's Rabbi Akiva's opinion, and that, of course, is going to be problematic for us because that shows that the halacha of Tosfos Shvius comes from a pasuk. Now, Yishmael has a different explanation. He says it's to link the halachos of Choresh and Katzir, the halachos of harvesting and plowing. And we're going to see from that the planting only applies, the only thing that's usher to plant is things which are not planting of mitzvah, to exclude planting of the omer, the barley used for the korban omer. How do you see that? So Gemara says because the two are linked, and just like plowing has to be only rishus, only optional plowing, because there is no such thing as a mitzvah plowing. Under no circumstances is there a mitzvah to plow. There is no mitzvah to plow korban omer, to plow barley for the korban omer. If you find a already plowed field, you could use that to plant the omer. It's not a problem. So just like the plowing has to be optional plowing, that's what the plowing has to be referred to, because that's the only type of plowing there is. When the Torah talks about the Isser of Shemitah or even Shabbos, for planting, it's only talking about optional. It's not talking about planting of the korban omer, the barley for the korban omer, because that is a mitzvah. You cannot use already grown barley. You have to plant it l'shem the mitzvah, and therefore there is a mitzvah to plant, and that planting of that mitzvah, planting is not included in the Yisra Malacha on Shemitah or of Shabbos, specifically I think referring here to Shabbos. So we see a source for this halacha of Tosfos Shvius from Psukim. So the Gemara wants to know, how can you tell me this halacha of Moshe Sinai and Psukim? Which is it? Don't need both sources. So the Gemara says one is talking about old trees, one is talking about young trees. A field with young trees, the halacha of Moshe Sinai tells me that that's permitted if it's a certain density. That's to tell me the heter of the young trees. And the pasuk is to tell me the isser of the old trees. The Gemara says, no, but you don't need the pasuk, because if you're telling me the heter of the young trees, I can figure out that it must be isser of old trees in my own. So why do you need it? So Gemara says, so therefore it says follows. The halacha l'mash Sinai is only needed according to Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel holds that halacha l'mash Sinai. Rabbi Akiva has a pasuk. Rabbi Shmuel doesn't hold of Rabbi Akiva's pasuk. He uses the pasuk for something else. So that's why he has halacha l'mash Sinai. Now the Gemara says another approach, which is brought by Rav Yochanan. He says that Rabban Gamliel was still able to cancel these two halachos. He's not answering why we need a pasuk and we need a halacha Moshe Sinai. We already explained that that's a machlokes, which one you have. He's bothered by how does Rabban Gamliel go ahead and cancel these halachos. We said that his Beis Din went ahead and cancel it. So the Gemara explains because he had a pasuk also. He learns from Shabbos. There's no halacha of Tosfos Shabbos, so there shouldn't be any halacha of Tosfos Shemitah either. Now the Rishonim ask, there is a halacha of Tosfos Shabbos. The Rishonim explain that there is a much smaller halacha of Tosfos Shabbos. Tosfos Shabbos is just a few minutes or a small amount of time before Shabbos and after Shabbos. But what Gamliel did was he got rid of the much larger time, beginning all the way from Shavuos and Pesach all the way till Rosh Hashanah. That large time he got rid of, but he did allow a bit of time afterwards. And for that he said you don't find such a big halacha of adding on to Shabbos before Shabbos, and therefore you don't have it before Shemitah either. So that's how he was able to cancel a halacha l'Moshe Sinai and a pasuk, each one according to whichever opinion he holds of, because Rabban Gamliel had a pasuk on his side. He had Gzeira Shava. He learned that from Sukkim. So Gemara attacks this. By the way, the Gemara says, how could you come up with a Gzeira Shava and attack a pasuk or halacha Moshe Sinai? You're not allowed to make up your own Gzeira Shavas. That's the rule. Gzeira Shavas you can't invent on your own. You have to learn them from your Rebbe to go back to Har Sinai. So Rabban Gamliel couldn't have come up with that on his own. And if the pasuk or the drasha from the pasuk or the halacha Moshe Sinai pre-exists, you can't cancel that. So the Gemara answers, no, he didn't really cancel it. He held that it didn't apply. Rabban Gamliel held like Rabbi Shmuel, I used the halacha Moshe Sinai and not the pasuk, and he said that the halacha Moshe Sinai is limited. It was only created to the times of the Beis Hamikdash, because those we had three halacha Sinais that came together there. We had the halacha Moshe Sinai about the young trees being okay on Erev Shemitah. We had the halacha Moshe Sinai of bringing water in the Beis Hamikdash on Sukkos together with the mitzvah harava. So just like those two only existed during the times of the Beis Hamikdash, the halacha Moshe Sinai also only existed during the times of the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore the halacha of Tosfos Shemitah is canceled as soon as the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. That was what Rabban Gamliel came up with. That's what he added. He said this halacha Moshe Sinai does not apply anymore. That was a chiddush that he said. Alright, now the Gemara moves on to discuss the halachas of carrying water from a well or from a pool of water to water your field. So our Mishnah said that they are usher because it's too much work. Too much work to lower a pail and draw water and carry it from the well to a field. It's also too much work to move water from a pool of water to your field. So Gemara says moving water from a pool of water shouldn't be usher. Pool of water is not a lot of work. Pool of water, all you have to do is dig a trench from the pool and it'll flow through the trench to your field. So Gemara offers two approaches to why it's usher. Number one is that is true, but we make a gzeira. We're worried if we allow you to take from a pool of water, we're going to end up having people drawing water from a well with a pail, and that's usher because it's too much tircha. So the pool should be mutter, but it's a gzeira. The other approach, the Gemara says, is Rav Ashi. The first one was Rav Yochanan. The second one is Rav Ashi. He says that the pool will eventually dry up. Enough water will flow that it won't flow on its own. And therefore you're going to end up drawing water from the pool of water itself. So the pool itself will turn into a well. It's not that it's a gzeira, you'll confuse the pool of water with a well and end up drawing from a well. The pool always turns into a well. And then you're going to draw water and then that will be also. That's why we do not allow that. Says the Gemara, the difference between the two opinions seems to be whether or not they agree with the halacha of Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera says if you have a river flowing out of a lake, so you're allowed to use that river in order to water your fields. Why? So the river, the Gemara is assuming now at this point, is not going to stop. it's not going to dry up. So therefore, if the concern is that we're going to get confused between a lake and a well, then we're going to end up using the well. So then this situation also, you could get confused between the lake and the well. If, however, you have the other concern, which is that it's going to dry up, in this case it's not going to dry up, because the assumption here is that we're referring to a well that's not lake and a river that's not going to dry, and therefore it's not a concern. So therefore, if you held it that was a problem, you wouldn't have a problem with this. Now the Gemara quotes a different discussion about this halacha. The Gemara says Rabbi Zer's halacha was said in the name of Rabbi Bar Yirmi, in the name of Shmuel, about these rivers which flow from the lakes, and you're allowed to use them to water your field in Chol Hamoed. And Rabbi Yirmi asked Rabbi Zera, how could you say that? Because we saw in our Mishnah, you're not allowed to use wells, you're not allowed to use rainwater collected in lakes to water a field. So how are you allowed to do it here? And the answer was, because here it's not going to stop. This is a situation, he says, these are the lakes from Bavel, they aren't going to dry up, and therefore there's no concern. And again, that fits with one of the two opinions like we said above. Now the Gemara introduces a number of halachas about lakes and pools of water, as far as watering fields with them on Chol Hamoed. So first, the Gemara says, if you have pools of water that you filled with water before Yom Tov, it's forbidden to use them to water on Chol Hamoed, because the concern is that they may dry up and it's too much work. So Gemara says, if however there was a stream running between them, then you are allowed to use them, because the stream is enough to water the field, and therefore you're not going to have to do too much work to water it by drawing water from the pools. Says Rav Papa, that's only if the stream is big enough to water the majority of the field. That way, the only work you have left to do is a minority of the field. That's okay. Says the Gemara of Ashi disagrees. He says even if the majority of the field doesn't get watered by the stream, after a couple of days, eventually it will. So therefore, you don't need to worry about it. Even if it doesn't reach the majority of the field, it'll get through everything eventually. Okay, the Gemara brings another brisa. The Gemara says if you have two levels of fields, if two fields near each other that are in different levels, one field is higher than the other, and there's water dripping out of one field into the lower field, into a pool in the lower field. It's filling it because it's dripping, it's seeping through the earth, and it's dripping out of the side into that pool. And there's a spring that feeds the top field. So it says the Gemara, you're allowed to draw from the bottom field. There's no concern that it's going to dry up because it's being fed from the drippings from the top field. Says the Gemara, Rav Yirmiyah says it has to be still dripping, even though, because it could sometimes stop, so it has to be that you actively see the drops still coming out. You don't have to be afraid it's going to dry up. And Abai says that this spring feeding the top field still has to be feeding that field. If that stopped, then the water's going to run out eventually. And then we'll close another right. So Shimon Menashe says if you have two rows of plants, one higher than the other, you're not allowed to draw from the lower one to feed the upper one. Going from the lower one to the upper one is too much work. The Gemara says even more than that, said Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, even if it's one row and part of it is higher and part of it is lower, you can't draw from the lower part to feed the upper part, to water the upper part. That's too much work. Okay, next brisa. You're allowed to put water on vegetables growing in order to eat them on Yom Tov. You need to finish them off quickly. You want to eat them on Yom Tov itself. So you're allowed to water it, because that's called the tzarech Yom Tov. Now, if you just want to make them be nicer, be better, so then you're not allowed to. There's more quotes a story here that Ravina and Rabba Tosfa were walking on the way, and they saw somebody watering his vegetables on Chol Hamoed. And Rabba Tosfa said to Ravina, you should put him in chayrim. Look what he's doing. He's violating the halachos. He's watering on Chol Hamoed. So he said to him, why do you say that? Don't we have a brisa that says you're allowed to if you're planning on eating it on Yom Tov? So maybe this guy's planning on eating it on Yom Tov. Why do you think that he's doing something else? He said, no. What we said in that brisa was madlin. You're translating madlin as he's allowed to water the fields. It's not that he could draw water like Dali with a pail and water the field. That's not what madlin means. Madlin means to thin out some plants. Madlin we've seen in a brisa that talks about pulling out some plants so that the other plants grow stronger, thinning out the crop. So we have a brisa, we have a Mishnah that says you're allowed to thin out plants, and you thin out your own plants. So the machlok is whether or not you're allowed to thin also the plants that belong to the poor people, that's such as the peah in your field, which goes to the poor. Rabbi Yehuda says you are allowed to. Rabbi Meir says you're not allowed to. But whatever it is, that's what madlin means. It means to thin out plants. It has nothing to do with watering. So he said back to me, he said, that's not true. We have a brayso that says clearly, it says madlin mayim in this case. Madlin mayim li'yarakas kedei la'achal. You're allowed to be madlin water. So obviously it means watering, to draw the water into water. So it's okay. If you have a brayso, you have a brayso. If you have a specific clear brayso, I retract. I had the wrong shot. So I'm asking to you. All right, now the Gemara refers back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah had spoke about making ugiyos for vineyards. I want to know what ugiyos are. Rabbi Yehuda says they're little holes that you make near the roots of the trees in order to have them be filled with water. We have a brayso that says that ugiyos are called bedidin, which are little wells, and at the roots of olive trees and grapevines. So Gemara asks, is this true? Would Rabbi Yehuda allowed the people of Bnei Bar Tzisai to make these holes next to their vineyards, but our Mishnah says that it's usher. So that you're not allowed to make these ugiyos. So what's going on? So Gemara says no, it's different types of ugiyos. One is referring to where you're making new ones that weren't there before. That is usher. But if you're just reopening old ones that were there and they got filled, that you're allowed to do. Okay, referring back to the Mishnah, we had the halacha of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that talked about clearing out an amma, clearing out a stream that is bringing water from one place to another for people to drink. So the Gemara said that on Yontif and on Chol Moed you're not allowed to, according to Elazar ben Azariah. So the Gemara wants to know that is on Chol Moed and on Shemitah you're not allowed to. The Gemara wants to know what's the problem with Shemitah. Shemitah is what's the issur of clearing out a stream on Shemitah. So it says Machlokes between Rabbi Zera and Rabbi Abba bar Mamel what the issur is. One says that it looks like you are digging in the ground. As you clear the stream, you are digging through the ground. This is a new stream here that you're trying to dig out. So you're digging. It looks like you're hoeing. It looks like you're working the ground, which you're not allowed to do. The other holds, and it doesn't say which one is which, the other holds that what happens is that as you spoon out shovelfuls of dirt, you're going to pile them on the banks of the stream that you're trying to dig. That'll be nice soft earth for planting. So what you're doing is a malacha of softening the earth to plant, because that the cleared earth will be very implantable. So Gemara says, what's a case that's a difference between them? Where do you see that they argue about a specific case? So Gemara tries a few tries here. The Gemara first says, maybe the case is where as you dig, the water flows in right behind you. Right, the water's already coming, and you're literally digging out place, and it flows in. So there, you don't have to be concerned that it looks like you're hoeing. It doesn't look like you're hoeing. The water fills in right away. It is, however, softening the earth. You're providing soft earth on the banks of your stream. So Gemara says, but that can't be, because they both have to hold that the other one's chashash is true. They both have to hold that there is a problem of looking like you're hoeing, and there is a problem of creating soft earth. So in this situation, you're definitely creating soft earth. Why would the one who says that the main reason, the reason that Elazar ben Azariah asked it was because of looking like hoeing, how would he explain why this should be permitted? He also has to be concerned with the fact that you're making soft earth. So Gemara says, okay, I'll give you a different case. In this case, where as you scoop up the shovelfuls, you don't put them on the banks, you scatter them, you throw them far away, and they're scattered. So therefore, there's no problem of making soft earth to be used for planting, because they're scattered. Therefore, the Gemara explains, the one who holds that the problem is that you're creating soft earth for planting, here it's mutter. The one who holds that the problem is that it looks like hoeing, here it does look like it is hoeing, and therefore it is going to be usher in this situation. So the Gemara asks the same thing. The one who says that the reason that Elazar ben Azariah said it's usher is because of scattering the dirt, here he should still say it's usher because it looks like hoeing. The Gemara says no. He holds that it doesn't look like hoeing. He holds if you're scattering it far away, that's not how you hoe. That's not how the hoeing procedure looks, and therefore anybody who sees this will make it clear, he'll understand right away that this is not a manner of hoeing. Now, says the Gemara, Amemar had a different version of our Mishnah in which Elazar ben Azariah clearly said what his reasoning is, and he clearly said that the reason is that it looks like he's hoeing. Says the Gemara, so according to this, Elazar ben Azariah holds that it's usher to dig during Shemitah. Not do any type of hole digging because it looks like hoeing, looks like preparing the earth. Says Gemara, I have a contradiction, and I'll show you somewhere else where Elazar ben Azariah says that it is mutter to dig during Shemitah. What's that? It's a discussion about what you do if you have a lot of extra fertilizer in your field during Shemitah. There's a number of opinions in this Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Meir says you're allowed to pile it up, you're allowed to do the Tanakama, that is, says you're allowed to pile up whatever you want. You can make a pile of fertilizer, it's not a problem of the fact that it looks like you are fertilizing your field. It doesn't look like you're fertilizing your field, you're just storing up the fertilizer. Rabbi Meir says it's asur unless you dig 3 tvachim deep in the ground and put it there. There it's clear that you're just making a storehouse, you're not fertilizing the field. Or you make a platform 3 tvachim high and put it up on that, because then it's also clear like you're not fertilizing your field. Says the Gemara, if you had a little bit already fertilized in the field, you had some fertilizer out there, you're allowed to put more. It's clear that you're not fertilizing. Elazar ben Azariah says even that is asur, and here's Elazar ben Azariah, until you dig 3 tvachim deep or you make a platform 3 tvachim high. Is another heter, you put it on rocky surface that's not going to grow anything. That's also a good place to store your fertilizer. Anyway, but you see from this that Elazar ben Azariah allows you to dig 3 tvachim deep, because he says you put it in an area that's dug out 3 tvachim deep. So how you allowed to do that? It should look like hoeing. So my answer is no, it's referring to where it was dug before Shemitah. You made sure that it's prepared, and therefore you can use it to store your fertilizer. Or another potential answer would be, since you're filling it up with fertilizer, therefore it's clear that you're not hoeing. You're not trying to hoe, because you're putting in fertilizer there afterwards. You can tell that it's a storehouse. Okay, now the Gemara goes to the next phrase of the Mishnah, which says that you're allowed to fix a stuffed up water channel. You have a channel that's meant to bring water from place to place. It got filled up, so you're allowed to fix it. So the Gemara says, how much does it have to be that it was flowing, and how much you're allowed to fix it to? So it's got to be that it was flowing to some extent, because you're not allowed to make a new one. It has to be that it was flowing to some extent. It has to be enough of a flow to be considered a flow. So the question number 1 is, how much of a flow did it have before you fixed it? Question number 2 is, how much are you fixing it to? It has to be fixed to an extent that it's going to be fixable. It's going to be significantly flowing now. It has to work now. And the third thing is, how much work are you doing? You can't do too much work. Like we always said, in Halchas Chalamoid, it can't be too much work. So the Gemara says, the rule is as follows. It has to be at least 1 tefach deep now, and you're clearing it out to a depth of 6 tvachim. That way, you're making it 6 times as deep. 6 tvachim is an effective flow. It's not too much work. You only have to clear 5 tvachim work, and there still is a flow. Now it has a little bit of a flow. It has a tefach wide flow. That's the share that's good. It says Gemara that the ratio of 6 to 1 of what you're going to have against what you have now, you're going to end up with 6 times as much space as you have now. That's not the rule. It's not always 6 times as much. So if you had half a tefach, I want to clear it to 3 tvachim, that's no good, because half a tefach is not considered a significant flow, and 3 tvachim is not enough of a flow to say that now I created a flowing channel. 3 tvachim is not enough. Now, bigger than that, such as if you have 2 tvachim now, and now you want to widen it to 12 tvachim, that's also no good, because you have to dig 10 tvachim worth. That's too much work. So that can't be a heter. Says the Gemara, though, what about if it's 2 tvachim and you want to widen it to 7 tvachim? So 2 tvachim now is pretty good, and 7 tvachim is also more. It'll be nice and wide, 7 tvachim. You're also only digging out 5 tvachim. You're not doing too much. The question is, though, you have to dig further down. You have to go all the way down to the seventh tefach. But you don't even need the 7th tefach, because once you have 6 tvachim, it's already enough. It's considered to be enough of a flow. So can you dig out to 7 tvachim? Can you dig out 5 tvachim? When we said from 1 to 6 you can do, can you go from 2 to 7? It's also digging 5, but you have to lean deeper in the hole. You're allowed to do that. The Gemara says, take it, we don't have an answer to that. Okay, now the Gemara brings 3 examples of things you're allowed to do to clean up a river so that it flows well. Abaye allowed people of Bar Hamdach to clean out trees and branches growing in a river. Rabbi Yirmiyah allowed people of Sechusa to get rid of a spring was blocked up to allow them to clear the blockage. And the Gemara has one more example of Ashi allowed the people of Masam Bechasia to clear a sandbar where it's sand and mud collected, allowed them to clear it out of the Vornitz River. So the reason for all this is that it's Terech Rabbim. Since many people need this water, so this work was allowed because of Malacha for the benefit of the Rabbim, which is one of the categories of Heterim for Chalamod, like we've been discussing all this time.